Hello and welcome to my legislative report. I'm State Representative Mark Gillen of the 128th Legislative District in Berks County. This month's program is a tribute to those in Berks County and across the state and country who have served in the military during wartime. It's also a tribute to my own family, which produced so many brave veterans who fought in wars spanning the 20th century. These heroes left the comfort of family and friends and allowed themselves to be put in harm's way. Some were killed. Many more suffered physical and psychological injuries that lasted far beyond their war years. To me, a veteran's war experience personifies the definition of the word sacrifice. The concept of what I want for my life is not as important as what my country needs of my life. And no group demonstrated this selfless attitude more than our veterans from World War II. Over the past couple of years, I've had the privilege to interview many Berks County World War II veterans and record their stories for posterity. On this month's program, we'll have 3 of those excerpt interviews with Joseph Lockhart, Dan Schroeder, and Lyle Koenig. These men were all present and on duty at Pearl Harbor when it was bombed by Japanese planes on December 7th, 1941.
My name is Joseph LaRue Lockhart. I was born in Williamsport, Pennsylvania on October the 30th, 1922.
And what branch of the service were you in?
I served before the war and during the war in the Signal Corps. In Hawaii, I was in the Signal Company Aircraft Warning Hawaii, which was a brand new outfit, and that was the first radar ever to appear on the island of Oahu.
And how did you end up in Pearl Harbor?
Well, was on a ship, the Hunter Liggett. At that time, the Army conducted their own sea transport. And when we got to Honolulu, some Signal Corps officers came aboard the ship and recruited men for a new company, the Signal Company Aircraft Warning Hawaii. I applied and was accepted, so I got off the ship in Honolulu. We were taken to Schofield Barracks vicinity, where the new company's headquarters was on the road to Kolikoli Pass, and we had no equipment. No equipment appeared until, that was in December. We had no equipment until July of 1941. I think it interesting to consider the time frame. We received 6 portable SCR-270B radars in July of 41. They were put around the island for defense and coupled by landline to an information center which had to be built, and that was located at Fort Shafter, so that the network became operational about August to September of 1941. No one until that time had even seen a radar in the company. So people were trained, the network was established, and became operational in that short period of time. The unit that was on Opana Ridge was originally located at our barracks in Schofield. It was moved to Opana Ridge on Thanksgiving Day of 1941. So it was there about 2 weeks before the attack. The evening of, early evening of December the 6th, George Elliott and I were taken up to operate the radar at Opana Ridge for the exercise on Sunday morning, which was to run from 4 a.m. to 7 a.m. It was very little traffic, but after the program was over, I kept the radar running. I was going to give George some instruction on the operation of the unit. He had only been with the company a couple of weeks, and didn't know how to run it. So we started to the instruction, and this huge echo appeared. We called targets echoes at that time on the screen, and it was the largest thing I'd ever seen on a radar. It was on the cathode ray tube. It ran to the top of the tube and was about 1/8 of an inch wide, when normally a target would be not much more than a little bit higher than the blade of grass on the baseline. We tried to contact the information center, but everyone had left. The exercise was over. So we contacted the switchboard operator. Joe McDonald was operating the switchboard at that day, and asked him to look around to see if he could find someone to talk to. He searched and found Kermit Tyler, whom was a second lieutenant in the Air Corps, and one of the observers during the exercise. Talked to him and attempted to stress the size, the direction, the nature of the target that I was seeing, but I don't really think he knew that much about radar, and he told me to forget it, don't worry about it. So, but we continued to plot it. We plotted it all the way into within 20 some miles of the island, at which point we lost it in the interference, which was occasioned by leaky back echoes on the antenna. We picked it up first at 702 at 137 miles and followed it within 20 some miles of the island. We didn't know what it was. All I knew was very unusual. When we got back down to our camp, which was at Kwailoa, we were told that the Japanese had attacked, and we knew immediately that's what we had tracked.
Today I have with me Captain Dan Schrader. He is a Pearl Harbor survivor, and he's been gracious enough to share a few minutes of his remembrances of Pearl Harbor, both before and after the famous attack of December 7th, 1941. And Dan, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
We appreciate your service to the United States, and we appreciate you taking a few minutes to share a little bit about your experience in Pearl Harbor. But if we could rewind for a minute, you were in the service of the United States well before Pearl Harbor. Could you tell us a little bit about your training and your preparation?
Well, in June of 1938, graduated Reading High School. I immediately went to the Pennsylvania State Nautical School, which was a 2-year school for training of officers in the maritime service, either deck or engineering. Each class was 25, and a class graduated every 6 months, and a new class came in. The training ship was actually an old gunboat. It was 3-masted, but it also had a reciprocating steam engine powered by 2 boilers, coal-fired, hand. First,
it's 1938.
Yeah.
You're on a training vessel, and this ship, if I'm not mistaken, I heard you say earlier, was built in 1890 something.
Yeah,
So it's quite old itself.
Yeah. Eventually, I saw it get surveyed, taken on. They didn't trust it to go across the drink,
All right.
And so 2-year course, we made a spring and a fall cruise. I went aboard, I was 17. And I have a little snapshot here when we were coaling ship to go to Gitmo, to Guantanamo. In April of 41, I received a commission as ensign USNR Reserve. May, I was ordered to the Ash, which was a torpedo net tender. It was being built out in Lake Washington Shipyard, state of Washington. And so I was there while it was being built. And of course, when it was completed, we went down to Tiburon, where they had the net training facility, and the crew had to learn how to handle the nets, how to put them in place, recover them, and so forth and so on.
When you talk about a net tender, can you describe what its efficacy is in wartime? What's it preventing from happening?
Well, the nets themselves were 10-inch galvanized steel rings, intertwined. So if the ship was docked here, a little bit out in the harbor away from it, we laid a net held in place with big floats and kept taut with big cubes of cement, so that if a torpedo was fired, this net would stop it, would catch it, you know.
When you were at Pearl Harbor, you were on a net tender.
Yes.
And in fact, how many of the ships at Pearl Harbor were protected by this netting
Well,
you
that's
described?
the thing. They were. Washington thought that the water at Fort Island, where the battle wagons were tied up, was not deep enough for torpedoes to be launched. But the Japanese had aerial torpedo planes, and one battleship had as many as 6 hits with the aerial torpedo plane. So after the battleships were torpedoed, they settled down, but the deck was still above water because of the depth of Pearl Harbor and the relative depth of a battleship, you see.
It's the morning of December 7th, 1941. You've described a little bit about what happened to the Arizona. What is your vantage point that morning?
Well, my ship only had the 3 officers. A reserve lieutenant was the skipper, and a reserve ensign was the exec, and myself, engineering and commissary. Both the skipper and the exec were married and had naval housing. The home port of the Ash was Pearl Harbor because principally worked outside in that area. And so I had finished eating breakfast and went outside, had some fresh air, and I heard roar of aircraft, you know, but I didn't assume anything at the moment because we were tied up at Bishop's Point in the Navy Yard, which was right next to Hickam Field, a huge Army Air Force field. And any time was time that planes would come in from the States or depart. But when I heard this noise getting louder and louder, and before you knew it, they were swooping down. I saw the big red wall painted on the fuselage and could see the pilots as they pulled in, and I could hear the gunfire at Hickam Field.
You're close enough to see the pilot.
Yeah.
You recognize these are Japanese planes.
Right.
What's the first impulse? What do you need to do next? What's your battle station?
Well, I didn't really have a battle station, and of course, our only armament was a 3-inch shell projectile, 1 deck gun on the front deck, and a few submarine guns. And of course, all ammunition was locked up in the armory. I mean, in the case of the 3-inch gun, there was a ready box there to have shells in, none there. Even the 30 calibers weren't in the magazine to fire, you know. So they had to get the armory open, pass the big shells up hand over hand, load up the submachine guns, and toward the end of the Hickam activity, we did get some shots off. In fact, I have a ashtray made out of the cover point of a 3-inch shell and fired 30 caliber rounds. But that was our extent of it. My own thoughts, all this going on, I thought this is just a start, naturally. I mean, if they go to the trouble with all this activity, why, they're gonna, land and take over. However, the battleship Nevada, was able to get underway, had steam up, and went in the channel and then ran aground so that no traffic could come in past there. And the Oklahoma capsized, and someone going by there heard some tapping on the hull, and a piece was cut out, and men got out the next day.
You mentioned the Arizona being hit. You were there, you saw it, and it looked like a flame that was never going to go out. For several days, it burned. What was the fire suppression? Where were you proximal to the Arizona while this fire was going on?
Well, at Hickam Field and at Bishop's Point, I could not actually see that action, but I could hear it, of course, and so forth and so on. And they bit by bit, of course, two of the aircraft carriers, the big ones that we had, the Lexington and I think the Saratoga, were due into Pearl, but a heavy storm delayed their coming in. In the case of the Lexington, it came in a day after the attack, and the Saratoga was at sea, and they didn't bother chasing it.
So you come back to your old neighborhood, your old block.
Yeah.
All right. Who do you see? Who's the first one that you hug or shake hands with or say hello to?
My mother, yeah.
And your mother's reaction?
Oh, she's so happy.
She was happy to see you.
Yeah.
And what words did you exchange with her? What did she say to you?
Oh, I was so glad, naturally, and she said she prayed and prayers were answered, so forth,
So really the reception you get is from Mom, and she's saying she prayed for you, and you are her answer to prayer, coming back in one piece after World War II. Well, we couldn't be more thrilled than to hear this firsthand account from you, Dan, and we're delighted that you took the time to visit with us today. With me today is my friend Lyle Koenig, and we're visiting in his living room with he and his wife Irma. Thank you very much for joining us today, and I know you have shared these experiences in front of other groups with regard to your service during the Second World War, and we're going to look specifically for a few minutes here with your participation in Pearl Harbor. You're on duty December 7th, 1941. Could we just backtrack here for a little bit? How did you end up at Pearl Harbor? When did you enlist? When did you enter the service, and some of the circumstances surrounding that?
Well, I tried to join the Navy in 1939 after graduating from Penn Burnell High School. And I was a farm boy, and I passed my physically 100%. And the Navy turned me down because the height requirement was 5 feet 4 inches. I was short by 1/4 of an inch. So it took Hitler to get me into the service. He invaded Poland the 1st of September of '39. By the 9th of September, I was in the Navy. And boot camp was Newport, Rhode Island. They reduced it from 12 weeks to 8 weeks on the 1st of September of '39. I got to boot camp on a Sunday, and 8 weeks later on a Sunday, I was out of there. I was on the ammunition ship, the USS Parrot, to take me to the Philadelphia Navy Yard. he detoured up the Hudson River for 10 days and took on 10,000 tons of ammunition. And then he left Peekskill, New York, where we got the ammunition, and headed for Philadelphia Navy Yard. When I got to the Navy Yard, I was put into the receiving ship, and there I was assigned to the USS Branch 197. It was practically a brand new World War I destroyer. It only had 400 steaming miles on it, but it was put in the back channel, and it stayed there until we took it out and put it back in commission in December of '39.
I think I recall a conversation with you the last time I visited that your training was really a cakewalk compared to working in a farm, getting up early, and so you were physically fit and you were prepared for this fight.
Yeah, being half a field work, you had to walk. Not like plowing 30-acre fields. You plowed just one furrow at a time, and you had to walk every step of the way. We used 2 walking plows, so you plowed 15 acres.
You were in superior physical condition before you entered
Right.
the service.
At the training station, we probably marched 7 weeks out of the 8, and it was like a walk in the park to me.
It's no problem.
No problem.
What's the atmosphere on the ship? You've been hit, we've been hit, the damage is extensive. And morale probably could use a boost, is it safe to say? What's the look on the skipper's face and the other men realizing the nation's now at war?
Well, it united us. We were very angry that this had happened. See, we were not warned by this.
It's a sneak attack.
Yeah, we were not warned at all.
That second wave, when it came and it ended and was over with, resulted in catastrophic damage, and you were anticipating another wave by air.
Yes.
And the possibility of other ships being involved, and the possibility of amphibious assault. Can you remember how long after December 7th that began to dissipate? Was it fairly immediate? They're not coming. It's December 10th, or there's still a possibility that there could be another attack.
Well, when they didn't, when there was no third attack, I can't say. We were relieved. I know the Enterprise, we joined the Enterprise and looked for the chaps. And then when their planes were coming in for landing on December 7th off the Enterprise, and they came in with their landing lights on, and our own guns on Fort Allen shot them down.
Shot our own planes down.
Yeah.
So there was an instance of friendly fire.
There was that tense, you know, when they seen the red on the plane. See, we had a blue star with a red dot in it on a white background. And when these gunners seen this red on the plane, they reacted. They think they were chaps, and they shot our own planes down.
So it went from a relaxed environment, now it's hair triggered.
Right.
And the drone of an aircraft engine could mean another attack is on its way.
Right.
And so we end up losing our own planes, as you've described it here, as a consequence of that.
So we took the dot out of that red star, the blue star.
Okay, so there's no confusion at all.
You know?
After the planes are shot down, you've knocked the bombers out, your travels take you continually into other areas of the South Pacific region?
Well, the next battle was Coral Sea Battle. We were in the Coral Sea Battle. And we lost Lexington in the Coral Sea Battle.
It was the first of the great carrier battles,
Right.
if you will.
Right. See, being we were lacking a lot of ships. We hit and run was our tactics until the Midway battle. In the Midway battle, we lost the Yorktown.
Yorktown 1 was sunk.
Yeah, and we sunk 4 of the aircraft carriers.
4 Japanese aircraft carriers were sunk at Midway, and you were proximal to that conflict there at Midway?
Yeah, I seen the Yorktown, no doubt.
They eventually scuttled the Yorktown, if I'm not mistaken. She was severely injured. They tried to rescue her, and I think she was hit by a Japanese sub again.
Right.
They finally realized she wasn't recoverable.
A destroyer was tied alongside the Yorktown trying to get it to steam up, and a Jap sub sneaked in and sunk both the Yorktown and the destroyer.
As I recall the history of that, the destroyer went down rather quickly,
Yeah.
and there was substantial loss of life.
Yeah.
You've crossed the equator. They say join the Navy, you'll see the world. It sounds like it may have been true in some respects. You had never been to Pearl Harbor, you'd never been to Hawaii before, you'd never been to any of these places. Is that your frame of reference looking back? You saw a substantial part of the world or traveled to places you might not otherwise go?
Well, they used to say, join the Navy and see the world. Well, I seen the sea. We traveled 110,000 miles the first year of the war.
Wow.
We were on one of the 5 top ships. The top destroyer was 125,000. So, what do you see? You see the sea.
So you were the equivalent of 4+ times around the globe. In
Right.
terms of if you're circumnavigating, it's about 24,000 miles. Do you ever get seasick? Did you ever get tired of it being out there?
Well, my first year in the Navy, I got seasick every time I went out. The landing was rough, and we used to be in port quite a bit, and every time we went out, I had to feed the fish.
Okay, I understand.
And then the Pacific is altogether different. Why, it's a lot smoother out there.
I've talked to veterans who came in after Pearl Harbor was hit. My dad was one of those people. But for you, it was a relatively long war. You were there when war started in Europe in 1939, and I'm assuming you didn't get out until after 1945, is that correct?
October 22nd, 45.
All right. Does this ever wear on an individual in terms of their emotion, their body, their spirit? We talk about the stress that's out there. How did that affect you?
Well, I used to write home about how boring it was at sea. And finally my mom got tired of hearing it, and she told me. Yeah.
So there was a certain amount of boredom, which was occasionally punctuated by an attack, an engagement, Midway, the Battle of Coral Sea. That's all the time we have for this month's program. If you were moved by what you just saw and heard, then make sure that this year you make an effort to thank our veterans, whether they served during wartime or peacetime. Participate in your local Memorial Day and Veterans Day activities. Volunteer a few hours of your time at a VA hospital or donate money to help maintain a veterans memorial. Above all, say thank you to anyone you meet who fought to keep freedom alive. I'm State Representative Mark Gillen. Thanks for watching, and please join me next time for Legislative Report.